Hello, I'm EzraPoundGroyper, and abiding by this name or moniker has done me a lot of damage in the past. But when I see someone so blatantly trying to copy my mojo and steal my vital fluids from my body, I think I must do something about it. Because I was the first subpoundite, and I think this is a very important subject to go over. I need to assert myself in a place of dominance here and prevent you from consecrating my massed flesh and semen with your lies. So I will go over and check out every one of your pound focused videos, because these are, you know much about Pound. All of these are. And I will see if they are up to a viable quality for propagation in the future. And I will decide if I think these are worthwhile. Now, I have a chicken parm that I got sent to me in the mail that I am eating right now, and I have 4 espressos, so I hope that does this enough service. I don't know if anything else will, but yeah, let's get into it.
Ezra Pound's cantos are a monumental behemoth of 20th century poetry, a lifelong work that changed and evolved alongside the author himself. In this video, I will briefly introduce the cantos, as well as discuss the opening poem of the book. We will proceed in this fashion through the subsequent poems, dedicating a video to each poem or grouping them together where necessary. This will most definitely be an effort of many years and, of course, no substitute for reading the work on your own time.
Alright, so, already bad. He's doing a book club. Now, Pound, in one of his literary essays, he says that book clubs are bad because they create an ideological system in which you have to abide to literature. And this is a no-no for Pound. Mostly because it creates this concept within the reader's head that you can come to an interpretation of a text that is absolute. Now, I think there's a possibility that Pound had a problem with this because he was in a Leibniz book club, but I'll continue to go forth.
Nevertheless, my name is Edmund, and today we will begin delving into Ezra Pound's cantos. The cantos are Ezra Pound's confrontation with the history of our great world. Pound was a man of great learning, educated in more than 7 languages, a standard that I reckon should be imposed on any student of the classics. Severely well read and hungry for an understanding of the world.
Okay, I'm sorry, I had to check that. I couldn't see it behind the big-ass EzraPoundGroyper live reaction. I actually do want to move that now, it's really bugging me, but I'm just not going to. I will. Alright, so, Pound's languages. So, with fluency, I guess I don't know what fluency means because I am monolingual, so I'm not gonna pretend I know how this shit works, but yeah, most of these he was not fluent in, obviously. I mean, Old English, yeah, he read that. He was able to read Latin, Old English, and Ancient Greek because he studied them. And you can rhotically learn with the grammar these languages. And also Classical Chinese, which is not Mandarin. So just put that in perspective. He lived in France, Italy, and Spain, which is why he knew them enough to talk to other people. He's obviously born in America. Occitan, he used an Occitan grammar to be able to read the troubadours. And it's still one that's available. It's the only Occitan grammar. Occitan, I don't know how to fucking say that, but who gives a fuck?
Posed on any student of the classics. Severely well read and hungry for an understanding of the world through its history of art, thought, the political, and most importantly, poetry. I like to present the cantos as a book of historic impulses, where, at least in the first few batches of poems, Pound presents key human impulses as the principal themes of his writing. Reading the work with an attentive eye to the countless comparisons he makes of seemingly different historical episodes is crucial to its appreciation and understanding.
Alright, who wrote that?
As we will see in the future, there isn't
who wrote that? What?
as much difference between, say, Helen of Troy and Eleanor of Aquitaine as one may think if the generalities of their existences are contemplated. The work...
Okay, wait a sec. Yeah.
Seemingly different there isn't as
that actually bugged the fuck out of me.
Between, say, Helen of Troy and Eleanor of Aquitaine as one may think.
Okay.
If the
that he compares them in the third or fourth canto.
Generalities of their existences are contemplated. The work itself consists of 109 sections, each entitled Canto X, where X is a numeral, followed by drafts and fragments that were published posthumously. If you've read the Divine Comedy or are already familiar with Pound, you'll know that this is a direct borrowing from his beloved, our beloved, Dante Alighieri's structuring.
Or maybe he's borrowing from Giacomo Leopardi, who he held in high esteem also. I don't know how to say his name either. But still, there's no reason to believe that it is just Dante.
Of his magnum opus. The cantos were initially published in batches. The first batch, entitled A Draft of 16 Cantos, contained 16 poems and was published in 1925. Following this, either entirely new batches or old batches with new works inserted would be published every 3 to 5 years on average. You can consult the exact varying dates on the screen. Obviously,
the structure of the cantos is not going to be just Dante, because the structure of the cantos is new and experimental. Obviously, that's not what you're saying, and I'm not trying to make it seem like that's what you're saying, but that is, I don't know, whatever.
Right now. The work as a whole is famously difficult due to its obscurity. Pound draws on countless historical episodes for the content of the book.
Obscurity implies that you're trying to hide your subject matter. The word obscure means to hide something. Now, I don't think Pound was trying to do that.
Poems, many that are highly specific, to be found in an odd memoir or letter only a handful of people have properly studied or ever come across. His sweep of history ranges from ancient Greece and China to medieval Italy and France, and the personal and political tales of the two world wars. What complicates the work further is Pound's constant use of foreign languages within the work, most commonly ancient Greek, Occitan, and Chinese, as well as his use of small excerpts from all sorts of letters written by the hugely numbering subjects of his poems, sometimes only 2 or 3 words lifted and used amid other sources as he saw fit, or as the muses guided him. For if we refer to Nietzsche, we shall see that all truly great works an author finds to be his life's efforts write themselves.
I'm pretty sure I'm eating my chicken parm, but I don't think he would like the Nietzsche. Alright, maybe he would, if he was younger, but alright.
Author as a medium for some divine dictation, as Nietzsche said of his Zarathustra and Dostoevsky of the first half of his Crime and Punishment. I repeat that Pound was a man of great learning. It would have otherwise been impossible to create such a work. The cantos present an author who revels in our history with ease and good perceptive understanding, and who is a fine example to aspire to for any young man seeking to channel the muses. This work, of course, can be classified as a single long poem, like the Divine Comedy, but its constant traveling through space and time make it almost impossible to be read in one long, consistent fashion, especially since there is absolutely no plot to the work and no one unifying feature. However, and this...
Alright. Well, it's pretty convenient that my YouTube started buffering immediately at this point that I wanted to pause that. But, there's no one unifying feature or a primary point of the cantos. I think that is an insane thing to say, and I don't know if it's because you haven't read the cantos yet or if this is a book club, but yeah, if you read his essays, he says he's trying to use a fugue form, which explains the cyclical nature of his work and also explains the aspect of time and the different changes in time between it. He says the first 40 cantos of the cantos are to be like a detective novel in some way, in which you're trying to discover this point. By the time you're done with those 40 cantos, you're supposed to understand what that point is exactly. And it's not just the fugue form. I think it's kind of obvious around the end of those cantos anyway, but yeah. It's not just something where you can like open up a book of theology and understand like Dante. Like that's not how you understand poetry. Like that's people assume you can interpret and intuit Dante's structure of his work because you can use Thomas Aquinas as like a some type of companion to it. No, you can't. Companions don't help with understanding poetry. No, you read the poetry, you find what you like out of it, and then there are sources you want to discover about how this poetry was made or that are directly mentioned in the poem. You go and read those. That's how poetry has been read for thousands of years. You think Shakespeare didn't write a poem like this? You think he didn't reference Ovid or make allusions to authors that came to him 1,000 years prior? This isn't the innovative part of Pound. This isn't what's new about Pound. Pound is doing something that every other poet has done ever. He's making allusions. This is not... He's doing pastiche. I don't see how that is, I don't see that how that is revolutionary in any way. Maybe the way Pound does it, it is revolutionary, but it's not...
This is the primary point of the video, the beginning of the cantos, Canto 1, which we will be reading and analyzing today, thus permit us to identify the following. Ezra Pound imagines himself to be Odysseus, retelling man's experience within the world before him and around him through his own perception, in the manner of Homer's tale, a long epic of many, many episodes. Due to the controversial, often polarizing nature of Pound's biography, as well as how little relevance it has to a lot of the early material we will be looking at, I will gloss over any detailed time.
I agree. I don't think his biographical matter helps at all.
Line of his well-filled life until needed, and remind you of what the esteemed Louis Ferdinand Céline once said: "It's the device of the cameraman that interests me. The man who made it does not. These detours bother me." All I will say is the following. Pound was born in 1885.
And I will quote from Pound that if you want to learn anything about a poet, you should read his poetry, and that any biographical matter is completely irrelevant to the virtues of his poetry.
He passed away in 1972, and from the turn of the 20th century up until his death, he engaged fully in the writing of poetry, of which the cantos were a major part. He also penned essays on poetry, like The Spirit of Romance, The ABC of Reading, and so on. And in between these works, Pound would pen occasional political essays. We will not be looking at the latter works, unless in searches of quotes where the cantos required them for further elucidation. Fortunately, several recordings exist of Pound reciting his own poems, and I will be using these for the reading segments of this series. Of course, where unavailable, I will channel my inner Pound with a great power voice as a substitute. With that being said, let us begin our own Odyssean journey by listening to Pound's reading of the first canto.
And then went down to the ship.
Alright.
Wind
I think you guys know this already. I think you guys know this part.
in the north life.
In which he details an episode from Homer's Odyssey.
There we go.
What we just listened to was Pound's famous first canto in its final published form, in which he details an episode from Homer's Odyssey. Odysseus carrying out the commands of Circe at the mouth of the underworld in order to receive prophecy from Tiresias on how to return home, to Ithaca. An arduous journey of 10 years, following the already elapsed 10 years of his participation in the recently ended Trojan War. Odysseus, as did Pound, in part by way of channeling the cantos themselves, seeks the knowledge of the dead for his journey. The fact that Pound relates to Odysseus on this part of his journey, i.e. the seeking of the dead and their knowledge, is made obvious not only by his choosing to...
Alright. So, by reading Pound's earlier and shorter poetry, you kind of get a better idea of what he's trying to do in this canto. He mentions the Odyssey in, I believe, it's either Huseful and Mowbray or whatever, or Propertius, and when he mentions it, he says the sirens are singing, we know, and this is, he just puts the ancient Greek in there, because he wants the person to, he basically wants the reader to know that that's an important part of the poem, right? By putting into a foreign language, that this should take the extra effort to research. But he sang the Siren Song from the Odyssey, and the Siren Song is, I don't know why this isn't well known, but I think it's so important that he included this in Husserl Moberly, that we have seen what you have done in the Trojan War. We know, and we forgive you. And Trojan War to Pound is obviously in Husserl Moberly. I'm not saying Canto 1. Husserl Moberly, it's going to be World War I, right? This is, and I think this opens up the theme that he's trying to grasp, which is ultimately going to be sexuality first. That there are these men coming home from war, and there are a bunch of women telling them that they forgive them. Not that they feel bad about sending them to war or anything of the like, but that it is up to women to forgive the soldiers of this. And I think the fact that this is one of the most prominent mentions of the Odyssey before the first canto is really important to Pound's usage of the Odyssey. I mean, what's relevant about Pound's usage of the Odyssey is he just says multiple times that the Odyssey is basically like the best epic in human history, that it is the, he likes it more than the Iliad. He thinks the Iliad is too focused on marriage, I think. And he sees almost like the Odyssey is a critique of marriage. And I don't know if that's particularly relevant, but yeah.
To place this as the opening poem of the work, but by later cantos where he consistently summons various spirits of the dead in order to illuminate something for him. The best example of this is the Neoplatonic philosopher Plotinus in his Hell cantos, whom Pound presents as an agreement with Dante on the matter of intelligence being capable of saving the imperfect man. We will talk about this in much more detail once we reach cantos 14 and 15.
Why the fuck would he need to mention that, bro? This is why I hate video essays, for real.
Before we look at individual verses from the poem, I must explain that a majority of this poem is a translation of a translation. Pound's source text was a Latin translation of the Odyssey, which itself is a translation from the ancient Greek. If you look into...
Yeah, what's important about this translation is that it was used by Chapman, who is Pound's favorite translator of the Odyssey, so...
any secondary material on Ezra Pound, you will notice that many academics eternally seethe at his technique. His translations very often have little to do with the source material in terms of form, i.e. he utilizes a massive amount of artistic license, to the point where many of his translations can be considered as entirely new poems in and of themselves, such as his renditions of Occitan troubadour songs into English.
Yeah, you just don't get it. You don't get it. I'm not trying to explain to you why you're wrong, but you just don't get it.
For those who themselves have very little or no poetic ability, this is a source of constant upset and whining about academic integrity.
Read Pound's Chinese written character. That's Fenollosa, but you get what I mean.
For us, those who appreciate truly good work, regardless of how much the theoretic side behind it may be lacking, this is of course a source of joy, since we receive even more material to appreciate and ponder. I will also add that for the purposes of this video, we will be assuming that both the Iliad and the Odyssey were written by the same author, i.e. Homer, in a single lifetime. The Homeric question is something I might tackle later, when trying to approach Homer.
Bro, why is this being mentioned? Why are you mentioning this?
A separate dedicated video. The canto begins with the word "and," which Pound added to this part of the source text on his own initiative. What this means here is that the canto itself, while being...
Bro, if I wrote a regular essay like this, I would get a failing grade. Like, you are bringing up a random question out of nowhere for no reason. Like, fuck.
being the beginning of the entire work, is not in any way the beginning of the journey, whether Pound's or of any hero of the past. There is a prehistory, a history before the history of Homer's tales, and even a history that predates the tales of Hesiod. But it of course does not survive in any significant literary way, except perhaps for the few fragments of Mycenaean administrative documents. Do they imply a potential for further literature, or its existence at some point? This begs the question, did Homer, Sappho, Hesiod, Archilochus and the likes appear out of thin air, or continue some tradition that is forever unknown to us? If you've watched my video on Guillaume IX, was he granted a gift of troubadour song upon his birth?
What the fuck?
I.e., did biological factors align perfectly for him?
Okay, I can't wait to watch the... Alright, I'm gonna combine all of me critiquing and watching those other videos into this video, because that is already the most retarded thing I've ever heard.
Or was he following a now lost tradition of some place nearby, or perhaps even a distant ancestor? While one may wonder why Pound chose the specific starting point from the Odyssey, I would say that for a young man of his age, of my own approximate age, there is no better...
It's very obvious. It's because he went across the sea on a ship. Like a steamer or something like that. And then, if you go into the next 2 or 3 cantos, it's like... fuck. The chicken parm is hitting, bro. But, fuck! Fuck! Yeah, so, and on the steamer, next 3 cantos are about his life on a steamer. I guess, yeah, I mean, he was on the lower boards of a steamer in, like, the 1920s. Him relating to the wine god Zagreus and talking about being beat by people, it's not unlikely at all. This is about his own life. This is more biographical content than any biography you'll ever need to read. So, I think that's all that needs to be known about that. Yeah, he mentions the Sea of Saragossa or whatever in one of his latest cantos, one of his longer ones, but that's what drew that connection for me, because that is a part of the Atlantic Ocean that is known for its beauty, but that you have to actually be on a boat to see. And the fact that he felt the need to mention that in a poetic context would have meant that it was something that was in his own life. So I think that is more obvious than a lot of the other conclusions you can make about his life from his poetry.
Better episode to illustrate what an inquisitive soul most seeks: knowledge and a way to return home. The home here being a place from where the body and activity of an individual can function in its rightful way. Odysseus' journey home, to Ithaca, to his rightful throne, is what Pound must have felt to have undertaken with his life's efforts. He sought a throne within the poetic world, a throne within a chaotic world from which he could impart wisdoms on his subjects, young, seeking, perhaps disillusioned audiences. At that point, not yet...
Alright, I would like to know what book you're reading from. Maybe it's in here? No? Okay. That's obviously a quotation from somewhere, though.
Having achieved the heights he did later in life, Pound surely felt that he is only just embarking on the journey. A passage home is not guaranteed, the throne is not guaranteed either. Here I refer to the slaying of the suitors. I recommend reading Pound's ABC of Reading and his numerous comments on historic and contemporary poets to understand his own manifestation of these slayings. So why not seek knowledge from the dead, from those who made their way in the world already, those who have aged through it and can impart the learnings of...
I actually don't think it's a bad metaphor to make, but I don't know where it's from.
Their experiences if only asked. Pound, around this time, was extremely disillusioned with his experiences in academia. They punished a bright, young mind for smoking cigarillos indoors and inviting a woman to his room. They had no taste for fun at the Indiana faculties, as well as his move to England. His grievances with London are retold in his famous 1920 poem, King Selwyn Moberly. I urge you to pause this video and give it several reads. Perhaps Pound felt that his own history, prior to beginning the cantos, was of little importance. Hence he acknowledges its existence by the use of an and nothing more. What is now...
Alright, what? That is an insane... Like, his early life is, probably the most important thing that formed his character. Yeah, he learned, Occitan and read all of Dante, which was not common at all. when he was like fucking 16, 17, under the tutelage of one of his professors at Pennsylvania, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know why you would say that.
For them is to seek the dead in order to illuminate the path forward, and Pound will continue to seek the dead, as well as grieve the dead around him as the First World War takes his friends as casualties. As a personal tangent, I will add that there is not only intellectual knowledge to be found in the past. A way of life itself is to be discovered among the Greeks, the Romans, the medieval man. You do not have to side with Athens as the accepted, popular choice and turn to the intellectual life. For the past also offers Sparta and Crete for the young.
The fuck is this?
Man. Of course, we will not comment on today's unfortunate impossibility to live in such a manner. And besides, I digress. Pound continues detailing the journey of the ship in language that is closely reminiscent of his translation of The Seafarer, an old English poem written sometime in the second half of the first millennium. Once again, I urge you to pause this video and read through it. The similarities are uncanny. Odysseus is sailing to the place aforesaid by Circe, where he is to seek the spirit of the dead prophet Tiresias after carrying out the correct rites. Circe is a witch goddess inhabiting the island of Aea, who had received the sailors after they heard her sweet song, all except Odysseus, who had stayed behind on the ship, and Eurylochus, the commander of the men who suspected that this was all a trap. She gave them barley and cheese and pale honey added to Pramnian wine, into which she mixed malignant drugs, to make them entirely forget the land of their fathers. After this, she turned them into swine, the look of pigs, but the
I kind of just want to skip this.
As they had been before, and locked them in a pigsty. I call to your attention the choice of animal here. In most mythological writings, when interacting with a shadow...
Wow, that's crazy. They turn them into pigs. I wonder what that's a metaphor for. Okay, subjects are turned into a predatory animal. Domesticated animal. Hallucinogenic state. Alright. Maybe this works. Okay.
After the glories of the Trojan War...
Domestication. Is it domestication? Domestic life. That's more interesting to analyze Homer with. Maybe he did get that from a good source, but I think it's kind of more obvious what the metaphor is. I don't know.
Where the Hellenic body, the human body, excelled and acted in full awareness and manifestation of its intended nature, to go home, to the affairs of common men, to the wives and mothers, affairs not of the gods but of the rabble, maybe not but the domestication of a strong, powerful beast. All the struggle that Odysseus and his sailors encounter, while still struggle, and therefore good, falls short of the struggle of combat, of emerging either a victor in battle or a name to be remembered by history as dying blood pools in the scorching Aegean sun.
Okay.
Odysseus decided to visit Circe, whether out of his own curiosity to rescue his men or both, and was able to avoid her magic by the help of some herbs that the god Hermes had given him right before he entered her home. In order for Odysseus to avoid his human fate, he, as a god, interfered, giving Odysseus a good drug to counteract Circe's bad drug. To be more specific, Circe puts drugs in the food, but she will not be able to enchant you. For this good drug which I give you now will prevent her. And Odysseus relates that Hermes picked the plant out of the ground, and he explained the nature, physis, of it to me. It was black at the root, but with a milky flower. The gods call it moly. It is hard for mortal men to dig up. I mentioned the ancient Greek word physis, nature, or etymologically growing, with importance. Why does Hermes show the nature of the plant to a mortal? Why does he save Odysseus from his fate? Is it due to his high intelligence, his high mental capabilities? Odysseus, in his curiosity for the lands he comes across on his journey, is well suited for a process of mental penetration, seeking into the nature of the world. Perhaps Homer here is calling for man to begin seeking the nature of things, and thus, continuing from this, what Hermes did for the plant, Heraclitus declared he would do for all things, and those familiar with the works of Plato and Aristotle know the significance of further. Yet, what I find myself
get back to Pound, bro.
Is Homer here birthing some form of inquiry into the world?
What the fuck? This is like when I try to like create like filler for my essay, and because I don't respect the teacher in the class at all. I like the commentary about physis because you'll get to a later theme in the poem about the Eleusinian mysteries. Keep an eye on that, I guess. Growing, vegetable growth, that is really important to Pound.
Shame. perhaps the end of a war was akin to the end of a wonderful night of joys and revelry. Such seeking of nature...
No, if you go back to Hugh Moberly, I could just repeat what I previously said about it. It's obviously, what he's talking about is how there's a critique of war going on in the Odyssey that is also a critique of domestic life, because he sees them as inherently tied together, I think. Well, that's how maybe Pound sees it. I don't really know if this is Homer's belief, because Homer was big on arranged marriage, which actually, so yeah, he said, yeah, the downfall of arranged marriage is what caused the Trojan War. That is basically Homer's main theme at that point. But I don't know, with the Odyssey, it's much more deeper. It's like almost as if romantic love is destroyed by war also. So there's like these two forms of competing love. One is proof that, one poem is proof that arranged marriage is the most important thing, and then one is proof that when arranged marriage is no longer possible, that romantic love must be the only recourse, and that's what the Odyssey is. But the questions of how home life and war relate to each other, yeah, I would investigate that for your understanding of Pound, but I don't think it's like a pro-war message. I don't think this is some like BAP thing, or some masculine like right-wing thing that you're going to pull out of this.
Such philosophizing acts as protection from the unquantifiable, mysterious magics of a shamanistic fashion, and yet abstinence from it by the abandonment of the home, the abandonment of laws, of nomos, as experienced by the many great fallen heroes of the Trojan War, is much easier to achieve, and may be the physis of man himself. A physis not to be sought, for it is felt on its own when an organism excels in its rightful purpose. Nevertheless, Circe took Odysseus as a lover after seeing that he could resist her magic, restoring his men back to their human form. The group remained on the island for an entire year, and Circe advised him to seek the advice of the dead Tiresias before making it back to Ithaca. With detailed instructions, a ship fitted on her boat.
Alright, I'm going to get back to something here. The Iliad can be pro-war. I just don't think the Odyssey is, because of, or in the context of Pound's schemata or whatever, because the Iliad has to do with honor. The Odyssey, obviously, it has to do with the homecoming, which, in the case of Pound, is going to have explicitly to do with women. It's going to have to do with whores. It's going to have to do with prostitutes. It's going to have to do with every woman on every island he meets, Ulysses meets as he comes back home. So,
and the necessary items for a later ritual of sacrifice, a black ram and ewe, the men set forth on the godly sea. The man Odysseus is to seek, Tiresias, was a prophet from the city of Thebes, who began as an advisor to Cadmus himself, the founder of the city, and remained in his prophetic capacities for 7 generations. Though he is dead, he is able to think as if he was alive, a benefit granted to him by Persephone, the queen of the underworld. In this canto, Pound omits the specifics of what Circe says to Odysseus, for the canto already begins with the men sailing from her island. But, in Canto 47, Pound returns to fix the submission with the following. Who even dead had his mind and...
Alright, I'm not listening to that.
Leading a post-existence in a shadowy manner. Shadows as opposite of light, oceans or rivers flowing backwards rather than forwards. Odysseus, Perimedes, who is one of the sailors, and the aforementioned Eurylochus proceed to carry out their rites. The pitkin mentioned here is a little pit, the size of a forearm, precisely as instructed by Circe. They pour libations unto the dead, first mead and then sweet wine, water mixed with white milk, or an oath inflicted by their dead friend Elpenor, forgetting by that to come, to be forgotten by whether in Homer's Greek or in Latin, does not mention Avernus, the place of no birds. This was an insertion by Pound so as to suggest a bleak lake and shadowy woods, over which not like followed long absence, yet whom he dismisses, in spirit notices Odysseus, unlike the other spirits. Why?
You're literally just reciting a passage from the Odyssey. I hope you realize this. This is not...
Feels himself undying and never living by Proserpine's doing, has somehow already experienced Odysseus' inevitable death, and hence this visit, although backwards chronologically.
Alright, what?
Pound's Tiresias referred to. The two of interest to us are the following.
A translation error, really? Is that... Okay.
Either Tiresias, being a great prophet who feels himself undying and hence this visit, although backwards chronologically, is indeed a second time that Odysseus finds himself here, or rather Tiresias finds him. Or Pound here has imagined himself a second Odysseus, as I mentioned earlier.
Have you heard of creative license?
Himself for the count convenience, perhaps in an attempt to subdue history to his own that which is far behind us. In line with find that many of the events described in a text like the primary chronicle are chronologically incorrect, making debate over when, where, that which Tiresias told Odysseus. He shall return through difficult waters, difficult on account of Poseidon's spitefulness toward Odysseus for blinding his son Polyphemus, the Cyclops they encountered earlier on in the work. Chronologically speaking, this was the first event of the Odyssey, although it is to be found in the 9th book of the text. What he says then is the following line: lose all companions. In their
Alright. That was scholarly. I think that I can admit to that you made some advancement in my interpretation of the poem by talking about chronology and how that's used as a poetic device almost. That's interesting. That's cool.
original, as you can see on the screen, Tiresias does not present it in this manner. He instead tells Odysseus that if he and his men avoid eating the cattle of Helios, they might be able to return to Ithaca safely. But if they do eat the cattle, Odysseus will lose his companion. Wait, what happened?
Never mind, I take that back. Wait.
That involves a higher meaning, a higher power, and not withering away from mere biological process. Was Yukio Mishima a fan of this? Found here
That's hilarious.
seems to be once again toying with
I'm
the idea
laughing.
that Tiresias, as a prophet of lasting ability, has a different perception of time. Perhaps he has already seen the life of Odysseus in its entirety, perhaps even countless times. Hence why Pound cuts out the remaining parts of Tiresias' speech where he talks on what Odysseus must do to reverse the possible consequences of eating the cattle, and why he has him state the prophecy so clearly. He has foreseen.
I don't... Why is... So, you were saying Tiresias or whatever isn't in the Odyssey. It's like, okay, then, yeah, what is he in? He's in, like, Sophocles, right? So, I think this should tell you that he's not focusing on the Odyssey anymore. I don't really know what to tell you. I can give you a hint and say, yeah, Tiresias is a write-in for T.S. Eliot. That's what Pound called T.S. Eliot. But he's also, as a poetic character, is the Tiresias of Sophocles. He's not... I don't really know what to tell you, man, but...
Seen what will occur, Odysseus has, in his perception of time, already died, and thus he tells him simply, Odysseus shall lose all companions.
I don't even want to explain it to you, because this feels like information that...
Anticlea then comes, and Pound here cuts his translation with these famous lines. Like Wyatt Divas, that is Andreas Divas in Officina Vecli 1538.
Fuck.
Extremely literal, i.e. Christian. This particular fourth wall, as in cinema, extremely in 1538. This very much feels like a break in the fourth wall, as in Odysseus. He is translators of Greek. K, a Latin verse nice in an essay for his investigations.
Okay, so this is an early autobiography he wrote, like, super, like, when he was 20,
Translators of Greek. In the year of grace, 1906, 08, or 10, I picked from the Paris K a Latin version of the Odyssey by Andreas Divas Justinopolitanus. The volume containing also the Batrachomyomachia by Aldus Manutius and the Hymni Diorum rendered by Frank, and he sailed...
Lose all companions, and then Anticlea came like quiet Divus. That is Andreas Divus in Officina Ocelli 1538 out of Homer, and he sailed by Sirens, and thence outward and away, and unto Circe, venerandum, in the Cretan's phrase with the golden crown Aphrodite. This taunt, oh. Wait a sec. you might actually mention the thing I was about to.
Sirens.
And he sailed by sirens. No, this is actually just proof of what I was saying earlier about Husel and Moberly being kind of... Yeah, I think you should do a close reading of that before you do a close reading of Canto 1. That's probably the only thing I would say to you, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, he mentions the sirens again, which are... The siren song is like an innate part of the cantos, I think. And maybe it's a metaphor also for the fugue form he's working with. I don't know.
Outward and away and onto Circe.
The fugue form being maybe some sort of representation of female sexuality to Pound. I don't know.
In order to fulfill Openor's wishes for burial.
That's kind of a stretch of logic and imagination, though, on my part. But could be useful in the future if it turns out it's true.
Circe warns Odysseus and his men of the sirens, which they encounter after...
Yeah, but you aren't mentioning Husel and Moberly.
Who can over danger to be able to not succumb. What you have done, and then...
Oh.
It's unharmed, as the sirens sing on the Trojan
Okay,
wall.
we get it.
We know what you have done, and then...
Oh, shit. Now he's just...
Canto 20, what
Alright.
have you done?
Oh, okay, so... You actually did get it. Okay, that makes sense. I forgot. Okay. We know what you have done. What you have done, Odysseus. Okay, so... Yeah, you do know the siren song. It's cool. Alright, I was being too mean to you. I will retract any meanness about it that is related to this specifically, I guess.
Odysseus.
Yeah, because that is a reference to the siren song.
We know what you have done, fatal fates. Give. What were they given? Earwax. The source text Pound utilizes changes here, from Dios's translation of the Odyssey to a Latin translation of the Homeric hymn to Aphrodite by Georgios Daptona, of the book Brand, goddess of sexual love, beauty, and passions.
Yeah.
Referring to her dark eyelids.
This is all related. Yeah, female sexuality is one of the main themes of the
Bearing
cantos.
the Hermes. As a Latinization of his epithet, one of the attributes of Hermes is that he guides souls.
Yeah, I think the Argosida thing is like, he's trying to say that there's like an oppressive aspect to eyesight. I don't know why. I actually don't understand the metaphor really, but...
By rescinding Hermes of his tradition.
He talks about like the 100-eyed Hermes in the end of that canto. I don't know. I think maybe that is a metaphor for poetry also. That beauty has 100 eyes.
Passing the dead. He chooses to worship a deity of beauty and not Hermes.
That is not... I don't think this is the fucking... Okay, maybe it is. I don't know. But I don't think there's a choice being made here. I think he...
Travelers would often pray to. Furthermore, the golden wand is replaced by a golden bow.
Okay,
Both
that's
sticks
dumb.
of Virgil's Aeneid.
The reason why he mentions the golden bow is because of Fraser's Golden Bow, the book that him and T.S. Eliot were obsessed with. Which, yeah, it has to do with the Aeneid, but that is a much more obvious, I think, literary reference than you'd think it would be.
Aeneas visits the underworld in similar circumstances to Odysseus. He arrives by sea in the I also note that the meeting between Aphrodite and the father of her son, and his king is my father, and saw then, as of waves taking form, as the sea hard the glitter of crystal.
Why are you saying it like that? The fuck? Like, bro, Pound did not like his poetry to be read like that. I mean, him and Yeats would, like, scream poems up a chimney, but, like, that's, like... Usually he and Basil Bunting agreed that his poetry should be read with, like, a natural voice, I think.
Aeneas needs a gold lamb.
Like, that's not how Pound read his shit. Obviously, okay.
Growing on a tree in a forest near Avernus. Aphrodite's doves land on the tree so that Aeneas can retrieve a bough as a gift for Proserpine. Only after he puts the bough in the door of her palace can Aeneas go to the Elysian fields where he finds his father. After they have their conversation and Anchises delivers his prophecy, Aeneas, his father, and the Sibyl, Aeneas' prophet guide, go to the Ivory Gate where Aeneas can leave the underworld and return to his companions. From recounting this episode, the similarity that Pound observed between the recounted parts of the Odyssey and the Aeneid is clearly evident, and it is no surprise that Pound, as a man of beauty, i.e. a man of poetry...
This starts off the theme of the Elysian Mysteries, by the way. Yeah, Persephone, whatever. She is, like, probably one of the main figures in the Cantos, and with obviously Aphrodite and Circe or whatever, but I don't know.
Made the choice of Aphrodite as his guide, and not Hermes. Additionally, in light of what we just said, Pound's earlier decision to change Tiresias' golden scepter to a golden wand also becomes much clearer. He hones in on the imagery of Aphrodite's golden bow. The recording we listened to omits the final words of the poem, and you can see them on the screen right now. They are simply, so that. This, in effect, is informing us that his preamble is over, the introduction to what we will come across in the video. The hero, Pound, is its tradition. Pound, it is quite going through it in the second half of the verse. To me, odd. You get to a manner as what we did today. Pretty with the characters of this tradition describing.
I wish you focused more on analysis, but I liked being like really pedantic and like criticizing your lack of analysis on everything. You said like 5 things throughout that entire video. Some of them were right, and then some of them were not right. But yeah, that's why I don't like video essays, because it's like 40 minutes of you saying basically like 5 different things.